Hey there, welcome to the Reinsurance Podcast, the place where we dive into all things reinsurance, the coolest part of insurance. We're your hosts, Jared and Ben, a couple of ex-practitioners who loved the industry so much we founded Supercede to tackle some of its biggest headaches. And we're here to share our insights and stories with expert guests as we uncover what's really going on in the industry.
All right, welcome back, everybody, to the Reinsurance Podcast. Delighted to have a extra special guest, or a hyper special guest, with us today in the form of Amrit Santhirasenan of Hyperexponential. How are you doing, Amrit?
I'm very well. You nailed my name in one. That was very impressive. I was wondering how many takes we would need for that. But that
one take, one and done.
I am great. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be on this show.
Excellent transition with the hyper excitement of having Amrit on the show.
I couldn't work out the hierarchy, actually, because super excitement is hyper excitement even more.
It's way more.
Yeah.
Way more. We always ask, we'll bring Amrit as a proper reinsurance and insurance nerd like us, so super excited for this session.
Hyper excited.
Hyper excited for this conversation. But we always start with people's journey into insurance and reinsurance. And your background is as an actuary, but how did you first get into that? And then I'm super excited and hyper excited to talk about founding Hyperexponential and talking to the founder journey as well. But how did you find yourself pursuing actuarial science and going into the industry?
Yeah, I was going to say that I decided I wanted to work in insurance from when I was 5, but that would be a total lie. Like lots of people fell into insurance in, the classical way that you hear about. Studied software engineering at university. I always, my team will be fed up with me making this joke, but I think it's important that it gets immortalized in a podcast, is that I was like one of the few people who was stupid enough to study software engineering and then leave the sector. So I thought it'd be a bad idea to be a software engineer, because I graduated around the time the dot-com bubble burst. And lots of people were saying, like, internet, like, what's that? That's not going to be anything big. Yep. So I was one of those people that left it behind. My cousin is an underwriter, and he put me onto the world of actuarial. I loved maths. I'm a huge maths, technology, human nerd. And I think like insurance is like one of the fascinating sectors that intersects those three things. Yeah. So he's like, oh, you like maths? Like that's an area like actuaries do interesting mathematical stuff in the world of risk. Why don't you look at that? And I, didn't really know what I wanted to do having finished at university. So I said, well, give it a go. And the rest is history, right? I actually ended up falling into the specialty and commercial insurance sector and actually ended up becoming a reinsurance pricing actuary to start my career at Catlin, which is now part of AXA XL. So,
Very, very cool. And if you don't know Amrit already, you are the founder of Hyperexponential. We'll let you introduce what HX does, and then we'll tuck into the journey of you founding that business.
Yeah, sure thing. So like we build the infrastructure that helps pricing and underwriting teams make better decisions. That's our job. We have been on many iterations of our mission and vision, as I imagine you have as well. But the thing that we see really clearly from our clients is the pricing and underwriting decisions they make are just really the biggest, most fundamental, impactful decisions that impact basically everything that happens downstream of money flowing into an insurance company. And I saw my job working as an actuary, the opportunity to use technology to help people do that better. And that's what we do. We believe that if we can make people more productive, more collaborative, and increase the sophistication of the decisions they make, that has a very leveraged impact on everything, the premium, the claims, the expenses, the kind of happiness, fulfillment, productivity, loads of things in the job. So we build the software that does that.
Yeah. It sounds reminiscent of me and Ben's first conversations. Sort of you're in the job doing it day to day, and you're sort of looking, you come from a software engineering background and sort of looking at the future of the industry and going, there is no way that in 40 years when we're retiring that this is how this work is done. And what was the genesis? I remember ours very clearly when it was like, we're going to go for it. What was your sort of genesis of, I'm going to quit my stable job within a firm worth billions of dollars and go out on my own and write software?
Yeah, it's a great question. I actually have a slide in one of the decks that I do when I'm talking to other entrepreneurs, which is like, why did you quit your job as a very well-paid actuary to go work in a car park in Peckham? That's what we did. I mean, and you're right, it's a classical story. I call it frustration-driven development, right? Like we were working in the sector. like I had this, because of my background as a software engineer, like I had a really great journey working at my last company, where actually I was in charge of building the technology out internally for them to make better pricing decisions. This was in the era where people could see really clearly that Excel is one of the greatest pieces of software of all time, but wasn't going to be the way that the 21st century attacked these problems. And so we were tasked with actually building the next generation of software internally. I made the assumption that there would be good software out there to do this job, because there's $7 trillion of insurance premium out there, more than, knocking on $2 trillion in the P&C sector alone. Obviously, before you cut that down into the slightly more niche areas, but very large amounts of money flowing through our sector. And probably a bit like you, just was shocked that no one was putting the effort into this. And so did that very cliched thing where like banged my hand on the table and said, like, someone has to do something about this. And then it was like, oh, hold on. Like, I'm a software engineer turned actuary. I've worked in the sector. Like, I can be a good product manager for this problem, right? And I was also naive enough to underestimate how incredibly hard it is to build an enterprise technology business servicing a very large, very important financial institution. So that's how it happened.
And you knew of a really nice car park in Peckham, apparently.
That's right, yeah.
Equivalent of the Silicon Valley garage or condo or whatever.
The Silicon car park, as people used to tease us about. I remember it incredibly fondly. I haven't been back in a little while, but the Peckham Levels was where HX was born.
No, very cool. And I know your journey has changed quite a lot because of the massive success. So congratulations again for how well everything's been going on your journey. But I guess initially it was sort of just yourself, and then gradually that grew. But you were kind of arguing some software is better than insurer or reinsurer XYZ. All of your professional pricing people, like yourself, they'd previously used. Now probably you've got more pricing people than they have. But how's that journey been to actually persuading the industry to adopt software?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So it was me and my co-founder Michael, both actually actuaries, software engineers turned actuary, that were on this journey together. I remember very distinctly the start of our journey in 2017. Every founder has the story of being laughed out of the room by people who then went on to buy their software, right? Like, we have our fair share of those, right? I think everyone assumes HX has just gone like up and to the right all the way. There's been our bumps along the way. I'd say a couple of things, right? So I think when I set up HX, I could see I'd say there's three aspects that were like starting to gather momentum. Like, the first thing was the shift to open source analytics. Like, if you look at people coming out of university today, they're all proficient in Python and, the languages of technology like that. Like, all the engineers that our devs use internally are also part of the lingua franca of the people who are kind of emerging into the kind of insurance space. So I could see that trend beginning. Then there was the cloud. And, for companies like ours who are cloud native, right, that feels obvious. But, in 2017, there were lots of companies like not putting software in any piece of technology where I can't visit the data center. Right. So I could see that momentum gathering shift and I could see that gathering momentum. Then the last one is actually the shift of the mindsets of the people who were actually tasked with kind of generating value for their shareholders. So if I looked at my managers and their managers and looking up to the C-suite, they were no longer seeing kind of technology as an administrative kind of tool. They were seeing it as a mechanism to generate profit. And so those three things were starting to gather momentum. At the very beginning, it was tough. Right? There were lots of people who were going, hold on a minute, like, where's the on-prem, where's the CD-ROM? I was like, there's no CD-ROM, there's 6 of us, right? Like, we don't print CD-ROM, sorry. Right? Like, and so overcoming some of that was tough. When we were able to, I imagine a lot like you guys have been able to take advantage of the fact that there were no CD-ROMs meant that we could put the software in people's hands and deliver value in a week versus a month. Then that started to turn the tide and the momentum started to gather, because the practitioners, like, you see this, like, this embedded energy starts to build up inside a company, and it's like, we need to do something. And then what happens is it smashes into a wall of like 65 different challenges inside $1 billion company. And so the cloud actually started to really, really help. Same thing for open source analytics, right? Like, in our product, you don't have to spend £1,000 a day and the consultant to use our software, right? Like, you can learn by Googling. You can also spend £1,000, you can spend £5,000 a day if you like, right? Like, but you don't have to. And then the last one, which is something that we've seen over the last few years, which I think you're seeing as well, is kind of the opportunity to use technology to generate efficiency, profit, increase profitability. That was kind of the final part of the zeitgeist that over the last few years, particularly post-pandemic, right, that we've seen as people just working more remotely, more digitally, started to really work. So I'd say all of these things started to build, but we had to like actually use the things that people saw as a cost of our software to show as a benefit.
Yep.
But just being honest, like there was a lot of like walking around
Yeah.
this square mile with a backpack and an HDMI cable, right? Like, that's what we did.
Yeah. When you have this difficulty, when you, similar to you, it's when you think about building software in this space, because it's an industry that requires so much new software, and it's so apparent that there's gaps in what's available, it feels very self-evident that we'll build this thing and everyone's going to go, oh my God, we obviously all need this. But it doesn't always work as cleanly. Good Lord, we both wish it would. But there's awareness of these people build a bunch of things in-house. They have consultant relationships. They have all these other sort of mechanisms within those organizations that make that adoption, whilst we have a ton of supporters, harder to get things and pushed over the line. But you're right, all those tailwinds are there, and you're seeing that shift begin to move. The other thing that we looked at really, really early on in our journey was an awareness that these solutions would be better able to talk to each other than the systems of the past. Now, you might not even know this story. So I first heard of what you guys were doing at Norton Rose Fulbright's Insurathon.
I remember it very well.
And I remember I met Richard there. Yeah. And I was like, and he was the only like reinsurance person. I was like, oh, we're going to be friends. We are. But he was talking about the thing that they're doing with pricing. And at the time we were mostly looking at deal structuring and that we weren't yet doing much on the data piece. But even then, there was this real excitement of, because if we could take the stuff that comes out of our platform and send that into what you guys are doing, this view of the future of the industry in which deals get structured and the recipients of those submissions and structures can turn around pricing in a far more efficient and quicker window to increase the value downstream, with the sort of ultimate game of, if we can improve the efficiency across the sector, that will benefit the insurers at the reinsurance pricing that they get, and that will trickle down to the consumers as they get access to more products that are more affordable. Like the innovation and efficiencies we can capture at the reinsurance end of the chain are profound in their impact throughout the rest of the chain. So this was what, 2020 maybe?
Yeah, I guess
before that,
2019 maybe?
2019.
Maybe
Yeah,
pre-pandemic,
Pre-pandemic, yeah.
So it was this idea of, we need to stay close to what you guys are doing because there's a real shared vision for the future of the industry. We'll talk about stuff that we're doing now off the back of that relationship. But how do you think about what excites you the most about reinsurance 15 years from now, with all the sort of momentum we see from other innovation?
Yeah, what a great question. Reinsurance is one of those fascinating sectors that's hard to relate to from the outside because just the size of the deals is so big, right? So if you think about people talk in the finance sector about like over-the-counter bespoke transactions, right? Reinsurance has that flavor about it. And so when you think about the kind of value generated per minute of person's time spent, it's very high, right? It's like, you think like in HX, we've got pricing products from like $5,000 marine policies all the way up to $25 million kind of reinsurance contracts, right? And if you think about the amount of time, like as I say, the value per unit of time on reinsurance, it's really high, right? So if you think about the incremental benefit that software providers like us, we were talking this morning, Jared, about like the next stack of technology, the productivity stack for sectors like parts of insurance like reinsurance. I think the opportunity is really like very clear, because if you can make someone, if you can make them 30% more productive, right? I think we've demonstrated through our integrations that we can take the time down by an order of magnitude, not percentage points, but an order of magnitude. But like, let's just pick something really conservative, like 25 to 30%. Like, what does that do to like the ability for the human beings to move the needle on the profitability, the claims, the business volumes, the efficiency? And the framing I always use, because sometimes we get skepticism, I'm sure you do as well, right, from people going, well, how will you move the needle on the bottom line? And I say to them, can you move the needle on the bottom line? If you like your job, you're an actuary, can you move the needle on the bottom line? And they're like, yeah, of course I can move the needle on the bottom line. I'm like, so if I could help you do your job twice as quickly, would you be twice as more useful, or would you be no more useful? Right? And they're like, oh. I was like all the time you spend schlepping on building integrations, on ingesting data and packaging it up, thinking about what Supercede do, on actually applying new techniques, on thinking about the different opportunities, making models happen faster, more effectively, synthesizing better data sources. If I can take that time down by an order of magnitude, you could spend more time on the things like thinking about the right way to structure a deal, the opportunities, which negotiations you should have, which external factors, like what does that do? And then all of a sudden the framing changes.
Yeah.
And I think that, thinking about what you said there, like building the bridge between like having all of the different ingredients or the utensils and the kind of final recipe that's cooked up is still something that we've got more work to do as an industry. Yeah. I don't know if you see this when you come in.
Yeah,
to clients.
We see it similar. I think one of the framings that we use, especially with the data cleansing component, is a recognition that is a chore, that is janitorial work. And I don't think building models is janitorial as such, but if you think about it from the sense of you have to spend so much time to build a model before you can sort of test its effectiveness or its efficacy. If you're able to build that model quicker, it allows you to iterate on it more quickly, allows you to take in other data sources, go, don't like those, change those out. It allows you to sort of rapidly test, right? If you think about a lot of startups and tech companies, they'll run like A/B tests. When you log into the website, I see a different thing than you see, and they're evaluating which one of us clicks on stuff. But when you get into like complicated reinsurance pricing and things, you just build the one because it takes you a month and a half to do. So you build that out and you go, this is the price we're going to go with. But what you're introducing is a way to iterate on that in a far more effective way and fine tune that in the same way that what we give you isn't sort of cleaner and better. We give you the cleaner, better data, but it's if we remove that janitorial work of getting the data ready, now what have we freed you up to do? 100%. What iteration can we do? And that becomes that it does require that sort of change in their perception of what their value is. But you're right. It's not I'm just making that work 10% faster for you. I'm unlocking your ability to fundamentally change the value that you deliver to an organization, right?
Yeah, you nailed it. And I think one of the things that always surprises me, I think the reinsurance sector is an area where this seems to be a little bit more endemic, is people have pre-decided that the kind of modeling processes, the analytical processes, the administrative processes are ossified. And so all that they can be done is like 30% better. And the thing I'm saying is like, you are insuring some of the most sophisticated companies in the world. Every single one of you is saying you're going to increase the quality, the velocity, the variety of the data that you're using to make decisions. So like, if we could free you up, I'm not saying that we, like, I was thinking about the question, like you click your fingers and think 40 years from now, if we could free you up to actually use that data better, like what would you do to evolve the process? At the moment, you can't even imagine the processes that you like, the systems and tools that you could build out. And so we have to kind of break that a little bit. And if you talk to the most progressive people, like in some of your clients, our shared clients, they're thinking this way, but actually the sector's taking time to adapt to that. And I think part of it is just that people have just been so used to spending months on the stuff that they don't get out of bed to do.
It's like introducing like physical librarians to the concept of the internet.
Yeah.
Like, how would you organize information differently if I told you didn't need any physical books? And it's like,
exactly.
Ooh.
Yeah.
I haven't even had time to think about that because I've still got to put the books back on the shelves.
Yeah, that's it. Exactly. And it's like, it's not necessarily, maybe it's learned helplessness. I don't know. I think that's probably a little bit unfair, but it's just kind of, it is that shift.
Yeah. Well, I think looking toward the thing that's really hard when you sort of really look towards the future is trying to understand where that change sits. Like if you that librarian analogy is a good one, because instead of introducing a concept like Google or similar, it's here's the Dewey Decimal System, but on this it's the same thing I'm doing now, but a little bit on this computer screen versus a fundamental reimagining of what the purpose we're trying to achieve is. And that leap is really hard because it requires you not only to evaluate the sort of subsequent things that happen. Okay, I've done this and now I'm doing these things and that might open up these other routes, which will bring us to, like, you have to sort of go through that journey and assess, the likelihood of all those various scenarios. And stretching out that far becomes really interesting. even I was in a conversation, CEO sort of roundtable thing in Monte Carlo 3 years ago, 2-3 years ago, and they're having this conversation around their belief was that treaty business might cease to exist in a fully efficient model because every risk could be independently repriced and go into reinsurance on like a micro-fac basis, kind of like quota share, but individually priced at maximum efficiency. And that's the kind of thing you'd have to sort of, I don't know if I agree or disagree with that, but it's an example of playing out this efficiency loop to its extreme, by which the car that you're buying and every single item just gets reinsured immediately, and the reinsurance ratio isn't just a proportional piece like quota share; it's priced on this additional basis. And
it is pretty mad, isn't it, when you think about reinsurance as a class that we kind of do work once a year,
yeah,
in some ways, right? That's sort of what we're dealing with, and I feel like maybe that's a good window to invite. Given that hyperexponential is not just reinsurance, but has recently announced a very exciting renew of its solutions. I've tried to embed the name into the sentence, but it didn't quite work, but it sort of worked. So Amrit, do tell us, what are you doing in the reinsurance world at the moment?
Yeah, so good question, Ben. So we've had reinsurance clients from the very beginning. One of the beauties of the London market and that where HX kind of was born is that people write a combination of direct fac insurance and reinsurance within the same company. Over the last kind of year or so, we've seen our clients desire for us to productionize and create templates to help them accelerate this build of reinsurance models. Mm-hmm. The thing about reinsurance models is that they're actually, lots of them are unique in their configuration, but not with respect to the building blocks.
Yeah.
So what we've built recently is a template which has a lot of the kind of components to build an excess of loss treaty model out. So it's got lots of the bits for kind of on leveling risk, analysing all of the trends inside, applying layer structures, providing a variety of the different experience and exposure rating mechanisms, and calculating prices. And what we've done is taken away all of the stuff that's very standard in that and left our clients to be able to tweak and tailor it to their own. And what we've seen is actually when you build a very complex model out, 80 or 90% of it is the same, but the value, the IP that our clients have is actually in the actual tweaks they make with the individual models. I'm sure there's analogies on your side as well. Yeah. So we put a lot of effort into kind of scanning the market, working with some partners who really understand the space, and actually building in kind of as much sophistication into the template as possible to allow our clients to really accelerate the speed of build. Because if you're thinking about it's like 80% of the model is standard, well then you could hopefully let people 5x the speed of build, but spend most of that time on actually the things that are unique to their proposition. So we launched that recently. We're taking it to our existing clients. It's a free part of the system, so it's not an extra cost. And if it's not, I've said it on the podcast now, so someone's going to make sure they get good value for money out of it.
Sales team cursing.
That's it, exactly. But we're using that, as part of the system to help people move quickly. So with new clients, that's something they'll be able to use to accelerate value. And for our existing clients, they'll at least be able to say, oh, well, actually, what does a reference implementation of this part of my model look like? So hopefully it raises the kind of standard for everyone who's using the Renew platform.
Yeah, I think it's a shared belief that, and how you look at it, that we have, where a lot of companies have looked at the role technology will play, and the way they've sort of seen things before is you sort of forcing solutions into boxes, and there has this homogeneity of what the outcome might be. And we've always looked at it similar to you, where the data is the data. But we wanted to build software that allows you to sort of get any view of that data that matters to you. And in the same way, if we send that data out and automatically connect it to clients that have HX, the same data set going to 6 different reinsurers, all running HX to run their models, we'll get 6 different outcomes. And that's correct, because they will have 6 different views. It's not to say, they're all going to have the same rate online. They're
6 different views of the world.
6 different views of the world in their portfolio. And that's how it should be. It should be one where the client can organize the data and carve up their book of business in the way that makes the most sense for them and their broker's collaboration with them. They'll send it to their reinsurers, all who will have their own views of risk, etc. But at the end of the day, that work becomes far, far faster, and the various structures that get evaluated, in a more effective and efficient time horizon, better results for everybody, but doesn't mean people have to sort of buy into just, homogenous pricing across the market. Right?
I also given you mentioned the possibility of different results, it reminded me of AI, given it's permanently in the back of everyone's minds at the moment. The exciting thing, I guess, with a lot of the technology you described there is that it's very clear what you have done and why you are getting the answers you are getting. Right? It's not this sort of black box of mystery where, for some strange reason, it's spun out this number and nobody on the team understands why or how. You're keeping control. But I appreciate on that side, that's what you do now. How do you think about AI was the question I wanted to ask as you look to the future.
Yeah, think about it a lot. I think it's one of the most, it's the platform shift of our time, right? And I don't know how both of you feel. We haven't talked about it much, but like building a technology company in this era is like fascinating from all sides, thinking about how it influences our product, but how it influences how we build the company.
Yeah.
Right. And we were talking this morning, Jared, about actually like what does company growth look like, right? For our clients, but for us as well, in an era where actually AI will be doing lots of supplementary and supporting and maybe some full replacement of some jobs. On the company side, on the product side, we're very, very excited by this. So we've got actually some really exciting products launching this year, thinking about how we can use AI to kind of automate much of the supplementary work that actuaries and underwriters do. So we talk about them as virtual underwriting support team and a virtual actuarial analyst, right? Because lots of the work that you do building a model in Renew is work that actually falls directly into the Copilot world.
Yeah.
Right. It's code. Renew is a technical platform. And so lots of code is written inside our platforms by our clients every day. And absolutely a lot of that code can be supported by a Copilot. We really believe in the human-machine symbiosis. Like, I think that's just really important. Insurance, like I did a whole blog post on this, like insurance is a game of outliers, right? It's a game of differentiation. And, by definition, just thinking about what you said there, Jared, like actually the reality is that different views of the world are actually how our clients differentiate, not through having necessarily algorithms that are just really fast and homogenous. And also different views, interpretations of how outlier events are going to impact the world make a big difference. But I think coming down to that efficiency, productivity kind of angle that we talked about before, AI adds another layer to that. Right, so if we think, one of the HX's original value propositions when we came into the market was, well, using open source analytics and cloud-based technology, we will cut the time it takes for you to build a model from a month down to 3 days. We're seeing now the opportunity to get it down to 15 minutes, right? And again, if it's taking that much time, that little time, what's the opportunity for people to spend their time on other things, on researching the factors, on better negotiations, right? On actually better analysis of the market. So we see a similar step change coming, but it's still, in our view, for the vast majority of the market, going to be human-machine interaction based.
It's really exciting to see not just the supply chain, but also kind of the value chain of the market having possibility to change in a way that it wants to, I guess. If you look at, I don't know, we used to do this work a lot when we in our consulting days, where you look at, the insurer passes it to the broker, and the broker passes it to the underwriter, and then to another broker, and then to the and so on to the retro, and that was always then seen as, how could this change? How could this get exciting? Well, they might put each other's hats on, and occasionally the brokers do some underwriting, and occasionally the underwriters do some distribution, and vice versa. But I don't think anybody as yet has drawn the map for how it will work if you add, third-party suppliers who play really meaningful roles on behalf of,
really good point.
The industry. If you get to the point where actually, to your point, 80% of model build can be outsourced, and you'd be stupid not to do that. Why would you build your own? I don't know if it's something like the axis. I don't even know what the parts of the car is called. Axles? A car? Is that the big frame that you put the wheels on? People don't tend to build those in-house. You just go to a supplier. The Apple, doesn't get all of its components built in-house. Chips are provided by a few specialist chip manufacturers. We haven't really figured out what our industry looks like with the involvement of specialist providers of component parts of our industry, right? Everybody's always built their own at home and hoped it's kind of similar to someone else's.
It's so true. And, we were talking about this previously about how actually insurance technology is really having its kind of heyday at the moment. If you look at the big, the kind of big institutional providers like Guidewire and so on, these are companies that are getting to $20 billion market caps now. And I think the broader economy is waking up to A, the importance of insurance in a world that's increasingly risky, right? And B, actually the role that technology can play. I think you're going to see a little bit of a shift compared to the previous era where technology was seen as kind of a necessary kind of minimalist evil that needed to be used to actually being a really critical partner. And I think it's just going to be interesting to see how that plays out. I think, I'd hope that companies like ours will play a big role in that, right?
Yeah.
We certainly, both of us, all of us want that to be the case.
One of the things that you brought up there, Ben, which I think is really interesting, is this recognition that the existing roles that all the parties play will evolve as well. And we both have brokers as clients as well. Like, it's not brokers are not involved in this conversation. But if we think about that tech stack where you're taking data and running it through models to help you evaluate those things, and actuaries can absolutely move between reinsurers back to the cedents to the brokering houses. But you have it where insurance companies are becoming more critical of understanding their own exposures and wanting to have their reinsurance programs at least priced in-house to get them an indicative sense as to what they should buy and what their appetite is for budgeting and reinsurance spend. Brokers have always done desk quoting and trying to get an idea of, before we go out with firm order terms, what do we think this could look like? And they're not going to go out totally blind and getting quotes with no indication. They've done some work in-house that says, here's what we expect this program to look like given the movement from last year, et cetera. And then reinsurers obviously have that role of pricing the risk itself. But as these software solutions interact and integrate more effectively, you'll get it where the cedents might more easily evaluate their own risks in-house before they determine what they're going to buy. Brokers absolutely will go out and structure 15 different approaches to that deal before saying to the market, we think it's one of these two options, right? And then reinsurers obviously being able to, one, price the risks they're given more effectively, but two, come back with alternative suggestions based on their own views of that risk. So you'll see each of those parties sort of going deeper into their option. I think that'll open up more collaboration, but it will be less of this is your lane, this is your lane, this is your lane, and much more of a relationship of we've done some of the work here already, here's what we're thinking, and then using that as the genesis or catalyst of those conversations with partners, which was, I think, will be a really interesting transition.
Yeah, it's a really good point that you make there. I don't think any counterparty in the value chain feels like if you made them more productive, they would just have less to do. Yeah. Right? I just don't think anyone feels that. Like, I don't know about you, like the same thing inside HX. The idea that if we automated our work, we'd all just go home earlier. No. Like, what a dream, right? Like, we all have too much to do. Yeah. And I think it's just really clear. Like, there are a very small number of sectors in society, certainly over the kind of, not over anything but a decade-long time horizon, where increases in capability lead to people just doing less.
Yeah.
Like, it's actually just not a thing that happens. Like, people end up doing more.
Yeah. Well, and the opportunity in a sector like this is so large that freeing up time just allows you to explore other verticals and other areas of this, new products and opportunities all over the place. So it becomes fairly clear that it wouldn't be, great, my job's done for the day. You go, well, what if I go and do that? What is an opportunity to go and our industry is filled with entrepreneurs. People have spun up businesses and they want to grow and have an impact on those organizations. So it'll absolutely be an accelerant.
Like an interesting post-podcast survey to ask around, in your day job, people of the reinsurance world, how much time do you spend on stuff you have to do versus stuff you want to do? And I wouldn't be surprised if it's an 80-20. Yeah, people just sort of grinding through. Yeah, you think you're pitching for 90-10. I can tell. 99-1.
We do surveys like this. We did one recently called the State of Pricing, right? And it just exactly this comes up: the amount of time people spend today on just data entry and schlepping through work they've done for 10 years. And it takes time to make these changes, but tools like both of ours, all of ours, right? Allow us to.
I always laugh when they do. You get this, so you look at the renewal seasons of the year and when people have freedom to do stuff they've always wanted to do but have never had time to do. And what tends to happen is they go, we'll have a summer project.
Oh, right? Yes.
And so they plan lots of things for the summer project and say, oh, you know what, we should time this for the summer project. And then, of course, what else happens? Everyone goes on holiday in the summer. And so the summer project fails. Yeah. And then it's back to the grindstone.
It's renewal season beckons, right? Yeah. All over again.
Yeah. When we talk a lot about the stuff that we're doing together. Obviously, we're running a roundtable. I think you're leading, Ben.
Yes. Yeah, we have a reinsurer roundtable. It is invite only. So sorry. This is not an advertisement to come and join us, but
it's a shared excitement around the stuff that our shared vision for how this industry evolves, and I think it's beginning to play out that this new stack of the future will be companies that think about the future more collaboratively, right? And it becomes a really interesting one when you look across our already, large list of shared clients and the universe beyond that, in looking at the role it has in a global industry. Right? We both are UK-based companies. You got the New York office, congratulations as well, spinning up. But you look at this not just being a thing that's happening in London, where we're recording this podcast, but what does this look like across sectors and across geographies around the world? And we have global clients, so it's unlocking like a huge, huge lift for how they think about their innovation stack. So it's exciting for us to lean into this.
Yeah, I'm still enjoying the name interplay as well. When we talk about broader collaboration, I was thinking about the industry equivalent of not running before you can walk. You have to get super data before you can hyper run everything else. Right?
Yeah, super hyper, some sort of Mary Poppins thing going on there.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, but what's next for you? So the reinsurance is a big focus for this year, which is what we wanted to talk about on this. But when you look at the end of this year, beyond that, what are the things that get you as the direction of travel? Yeah,
great question. So, I always, when people ask about this, like we've just scratched the surface of the US with a fingernail, right? I think the 30% of HX's revenue is already from companies in the US, working on the ground in the US, and we're just starting there really. So I think from that point of view, having built a substantial US operation from the UK, putting people on the ground closer to our customers, closer to the people who are thinking about buying our product, I think is just the beginning. So, I think there's a very significant company in HX to be built out just from succeeding there. The areas that interest us are, because the nature of the clients that all of our service is that they're very large and they do multiple things. So for lots of us, reinsurance is part of what they do, but actually they've got a variety of different other lines of business and verticals within their companies, because if you sell to some of the biggest insurers in the world, they broadly do every type of insurance. Yeah. The area that's most interesting for us is when we start to see people using our product in ways that we didn't quite expect. So, we've got a group health use case in our business now. We've got some brokers using our product. Yeah. We've been expanding into the SME sector. That's a really exciting area for us. So as people start to do that, our mission is lots of people in our space saw this as an actuarial problem, whereas we see this as a pricing problem. And so working on pricing across the entire landscape of our clients' problems is what's exciting for us. Yeah. And so, beyond the US, just starting to work on these increasing number of verticals and applications of pricing intelligence software to to our clients, I think is just exciting for us, and it will keep us busy for 10 years or more, right? Yeah,
for sure. I think one of the things that people on the outside of software companies don't see as much, but how much product innovation comes from seeing your customers do weird things. Oh, yeah. Well, why are you doing that? Yeah. Oh, you have this. You care about this other thing, which I'd never come across any of our plates before. But apparently, this is really important to your traditional flow of work. So, yeah, we can. Do other people do it this way too? And you begin to dig, and actually, lots of them do this other weird thing, or you find adjacent industries or sectors from this exploration. So you sort of keep your head on a swivel a little bit as the product evolves naturally down the primary track you go on, but at the same time being aware of the adjacent sort of windows that emerge from there. So perfect. I think this is all the time we've got. I'm getting waved at from Courtney behind us.
Time's gone quickly.
Amrit, this has been an absolutely amazing conversation.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, I'm glad to finally make it on. Yeah, and you guys did great work here, so thanks for having me.
Yeah. Thank you, Amrit. Thanks for tuning in to the Reinsurance Podcast. If you enjoyed our show, don't forget to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and leave us a review to let us know how we're doing, preferably 5 stars. For more insights and updates, follow us on LinkedIn and visit our website at supercede.com/podcasts. You'll find the links in the show notes.